right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to One Soccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming, joined by my colleague, Alex Gongay-Ruzik. And today we have a couple different topics to discuss. We have the women's national team wrapping up their June friendlies leading into the Olympics. And of course, the men's national team. We've got a big match coming up tomorrow, followed by, of course, another big match on Sunday against France leading into Copa America. So, Alex, first things first, how you doing this morning? Or I guess this afternoon for myself and this morning for you. How you doing?
Yeah, doing well, and yeah, almost the afternoon. We'll allow it, and yeah, just a busy week, right? Like everything's happening. You got games every 2 days. You got very interesting, pair of Canada versus Mexico games, which is always a good rivalry. Apparently, even if it's a friendly, we got ended up being a bit of a physical clash in game 2 yesterday between the women's national team in Mexico, and of course the men's national team are back ahead of a huge 6 weeks start of Copa America. Of course, the women now, they got to go out, focus on somehow, I don't know how Bev Priestman has to do it, make an 18-player squad with just 4 alternates. For then, when Copa America is over, of course, the Olympics starts. Man, it's never stopping. And I guess this kind of week of everything has been an early taste of how exciting the summer is going to be for Canadians who love soccer.
Absolutely. It's going to be fantastic. And for everyone in the chat right now, be sure to drop a like, get your guys' comments in. We'll try to address them as quickly as we can. We're going to talk about the women's national team first, go through the friendlies, talk about whose stock went up, whose stock maybe went down, take a look at Ollie Platt's projected roster for the Olympics, and Alex and I will talk about it and give our thoughts. And then we'll move over to the men's national team and an interesting couple of clips we have from Jesse Marsch as well as Alfonso Davies. So, Alex, first things first, starting with the women's national team, their first match, a 2-0 win in Montreal, followed up by a 1-1 draw against, obviously both sides were against Mexico at BMO. So what was your initial reaction? Let's start just quickly with the first match. 2-0, pretty relatively comfortable performance. Anyone stick out to you in that match?
Yeah, that's why friendlies are funny, because I think of the 2 games, Canada played better in the draw, funnily enough. But in the draw, they just didn't take their chances and conceded a cheap goal. But no, for this first game, it was a good winning performance. Again, I think in friendlies that's kind of secondary, but I think it was good the way they responded. They started very slow, but it was cagey, 0-0, and they kind of broke the game open. And I think the big thing that stood out is that Bev Priestman continues to do a very good job of adjusting in game. Of course, there's the question of how do you get that magic to click from the start, and that's something I'm kind of writing about right now for my takeaways from this window of like, Bev Priestman's in a bit of a unique situation where she keeps getting it right off the bench, and that's a good thing that she's like not scared to go 45th minute sub, bring in someone, but also how do you get it from the start? But that leads to my standout. So it was mostly the substitutes. Like Eveline Viens came in at halftime. I thought she should have started, but she came in and was electric, 2 assists, and was just so present there when she came on, was just all over the place. Her energy was contagious. Chloe Lacasse came on, scored a great goal, was stretching the field. That pair was very good together up front. Then in midfield, Simi Awujo came in, was just so solid, so composed, and showed why she could have earned a start. And then lastly, that Gabrielle Carl at left wing back. She's been in very, very good form for Washington. I'll tell anyone that who will listen how good form she's in. I thought she was going to start in her home province. She came off the bench and really stood out. So yeah, I think it was mostly a game for the bench players to come in and shine. The back 3 was very good. Like I think Vanessa Gilles was the player of the match. Kadisha Buchanan, Jade Rose all did well. Jessie Fleming really woke up with the subs, just because her and that Grosso pairing didn't really work in the first half. But yeah, the second half is where Canada really shone.
So I want to take what you just kind of talked about, and maybe it's because I know you and talk to you a lot and see you on X, but you mentioned 3 players that I was going to mention to you from this comment here, which is an excellent one, who played their way on and off of the Olympic roster after the send-off series. So Alex, let's just obviously focus on probably bubble players quickly for this conversation. You mentioned 3, Viens, Awujo, and Carl. Those are the 3 that I was going to bring up to you and said their stock had to have risen. If you had to pick 1 or 2, I guess, did it rise enough to play their way onto the squad, or do you think they're, do you think they're still, like, is there 1 or 2 that might fall short? What do you think about those 3 specifically before we move on to some players who maybe played their way off the roster?
I think of the 3, I think Viens already in. I think so? What's nice, because, and I think Priestman's alluded to it, Viens has proven she can be a very useful super sub. And I think she's proven to arguably be the most impactful of Canada's super subs. For Vienna, the question is, can she do it as a starter? I'd like to see her get a bit more, opportunity to do so. But I think Priestman knows that at the very least, even if she isn't able to get that figured out in time for this summer, Bien will be someone you can look at. Okay, it's 0-0 against France. Come bring her on off the bench. Colombia, New Zealand in the knockout stages. I think she's kind of cemented her place in that second half in Montreal. Showed why, right? You bring her in, she can destabilize the game. I think she's in. Gabby Carl, I think with her form, I think the fact that Priestman has turned to her more, I think also the fact that it just doesn't seem like Sydney Collins will be back in time. At least she'll probably be back in time for the Olympics, but she won't be fully healthy by the time they name a squad. I think that was kind of something you wondered, because in terms of left-sided players, it was Carl versus Collins versus Riviere, where I think if Collins drops out that mix, there's a reality in which you can bring both Carl and Riviere. Carl can play center back. She's played center back this year for Washington. She played center back in Sweden. I have to think she's in with the versatility and the fact that she's put in some great performances. Like, she was excellent at She Believes Cup. Now she was very good in this window. I think Carl should be in. Really, the question was Awujo, and I think Awujo cemented her place with her performance against Mexico, because it was dominant. Like, it was genuinely one of the best midfield performances I've seen in a while from any Canadian player. Like, she was so good in possession, just gliding every time she received the ball. But then she wasn't even there to attack. She was there to support Jessie Fleming, and she did that. Fleming had the full freedom to push forward, do Jessie Fleming things. In Montreal with Grosso alongside of that combination just didn't work, and you could see how Awujo really elevated her. I think if there's any chance that Quinn isn't fully fit for the Olympics, Awujo could start. Even if Quinn's fit, I think you can rotate through Quinn and Awujo, because Awujo brings something different. And yeah, here are the stats that you brought up. Obviously, 87% passes, and a lot of them were high risk forward passes. Like, they weren't just passing it backwards, anything. She had 3 out of 4 long balls, which backs it up. 3 chances created, 3 shots, 5 out of 5 dribbles, 7 out of 10 duels won, 2 interceptions, 1 tackle. It was just everything you want from a number 6, and that's so exciting that someone of her profile can step up and do that. And I think it cemented her spot in that Olympic.
I agree, and I just looking through the comments here. I had one name, because that's players who we're thinking maybe played their way onto the roster. What about players who maybe played themselves off? And when I think of one player that comes to mind, it is Julia Grosso. I don't know immediately if someone comes off. I don't know why she comes to mind. Maybe it's just because, again, she scored the goal that won us, the Olympics. She is a very talented young player, but it just seems like she's fighting a tough battle here in the midfield, Alex. And, do you think that there's a chance that she could be left off?
I'm thinking she still makes it in, but I definitely think 2 things are clear. She's not a starter in this setup right now. And I think because of that, there is always a chance she gets left out based on profile. I think the way I kind of see the midfield mix is that right now, Fleming and Grosso they haven't been able to play together in the setup, because you need one who can be a bit more defensive and one who can be a bit more offensive. Unfortunately, you saw it in Montreal when they're played together. It just either one of them gets put back and it sacrifices. Like, early in that Montreal game, Grosso was really good in the ball, but then Fleming was struggling, and then Fleming kind of started to play more aggressively. Then Grosso started to suffer because she had to play a bit more defensively. Like, they just don't seem to complement each other in this formation. I think in an ideal setup, if you want to get the best out of both of them together, you need a 6 underneath them. Canada's playing a 3-4-2-1. There's no room for that sort of 6. So I think for Grosso right now, the reality is she's Fleming's backup. And I think because of that, she makes to the Olympics, because there's no one else who can fill that role. So I think that's something where I think Grosso still makes it in, despite it looking like she might be on the outside in. But the fact is, she isn't a starter, and that could very well open up the door where maybe she is seen as an alternate, because the fact that she's Jessie Fleming backup, like I mentioned, right? Well, Jessie Fleming can play pretty much every minute of every game, so Grosso might not see the field a whole lot if that ends up being the case. Although Priestman has experimented with playing Grosso a bit higher up the pitch, which could also open the door to come in to be a bit more of a super sub.
I'm just putting up. I agree, Alex. I'm just putting up roster. All right. So there was a comment in here saying that Grosso could be not on the roster as well, one of the alternates. And then I obviously now naturally went over to Ollie's roster here, which is how we're going to end off this segment. So guys, let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are on this roster. I know Alex has got some thoughts, and I'm curious to see where he's going to go. So this is the 18-player roster that Ollie went with. He's got his alternates in there. There's 4 of them. So just we'll go very quickly between the three keepers. I don't think we need to spend too much time on it. No issues there, right? Like those, like Sheridan
I
and
think it's
D'Angelo,
just straightforward. Yeah,
that's
Sheridan's
straightforward.
the starter. D'Angelo, again, I like her profile. I just think Sheridan's the starter. If you need, you're comfortable with D'Angelo, you're comfortable with Prue. That's just a position of comfort. And Priestman's
Yeah.
probably laughing. She's like, "That's the one position I know. I'm set."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Like, we barely need. We can almost skip over, but yeah, I have no issues. Sheridan's obviously going to start probably every match. So he didn't bring a alternate for center backs, but the four center backs, all he decided to bring: Buchanan, Gilles, Rose, and Zadorsky. I don't have any issue. I'm trying to remember back to our roster, Alex. I'm positive we went with
We went
four
with
center backs,
four.
and we went with these four, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I
Pretty
think
sure.
that's the one one of the changes I could see in the squad, and I think it's something we've seen, at least I've seen over the last while, is that I think there's a reality in which Buchanan, Gilles, and Rose can play every game, and I think if you need cover, a has the fact that she's been playing regularly at CB for like the Spirit have had some injuries, so I think she spent like the last 4 games as a CB in a back four. She can play there, and what I wonder with Zadorsky's, it's tough because Zadorsky's been so good when she's but like that's what something again, it's something a bit of a hint of what I'm writing about. Zadorsky's been great for Canada the last 6 to 12 months. So if she does get left out, it's not on her merit. It's the fact that Rose has been so good, Gilles and Buchanan, that's your starting three. I think there's no doubts. What I wonder is that if you need an emergency fill in games, you got Carl there. Heck, Quinn can even go back there if needed. With Zadorsky, you can put them in as an alternate over for CB. She can bring her leadership, which is obviously a huge aspect of what she brings to the table. And then if there are any injuries to Buchanan, Gilles, Rose, knock on wood, you obviously don't want that. Okay, then you can bring Zadorsky in as an alternate. I just think as a bench spot, you're almost better served having maybe another attack or another midfielder with that different profile. Whereas Zadorsky, you can kind of have it as like a break glass in case of emergency. There's a defender injury. Carl rides out the game, and then I think you can switch after the game and bring someone in for an injury. That's what something like Zadorsky can bring, and that's kind of the one thing I've changed at least since the last time we built a roster a few months ago. If that makes sense.
Yep. Because I definitely remember building the roster with you, and I know that there was 4 center backs, 3 wing backs. So we'll talk about the specific changes once we kind of just break down the Ollie's roster right here. So wing backs, I think we went with the same 3. And you have no issues with these? You wouldn't bring a 4th wing back? These are just the same 3 we kind of talked about?
Yeah, I think this is no nonsense. Carl's earned a spot. I think Riviere, she struggled in the first game in Montreal, and it was a bit worrying, but then she was very good in Toronto last night. I think that was a bit of what she needed, that confidence to show what she can bring. I think if you have Lawrence, Riviere, Carl, and you can't forget that Becky can play there and Lacasse has been tried there, I would think that you're comfortable enough going with that sort of group at wing back. So yeah, I think just with Sydney Collins, their timeline's too long. Bianca St. George has been playing as a forward, or as winger essentially for North Carolina. I think you're pretty comfortable with that wing back group, especially with the Becky factor. That's important to be remembered.
Yeah, Riviere and Lawrence can also play on both sides, and like you said, I'd almost count Becky in the wing backs. Like you could easily just toss her in there if you wanted to. So yeah, I agree. Midfield sort of looks a little light. 3 players. I don't know if that's maybe an area to bring another if you're comfortable, but Quinn, Ujo, Fleming are the main 3. We have Grosso over there in the alternates. Your thoughts there? Do you like the fact that we're only bringing 3? I know, like with the system that we play,
way too light. I think
too late. Okay,
so that's midfield, especially. There's a lot of demand, especially over the 3 games. What's nice, like I mentioned, if Grosso is Fleming's cover, say by the 3rd game you've already locked up qualification, you can rest Fleming and throw Grosso in. I think that's one change you could kind of infer that if I'm picking out Zadorsky, I'm putting Grosso in because I think you'd rather need 4 center mids versus 4 center backs. I think you're going to go through more midfielders. You're going to need that rotation, especially I think something has to be remembered, and it's mentioned here by Afrikaans. Quinn's coming off an injury, a knee injury as well. They haven't played in over 6 weeks. Sounds like they can be back for the Olympics, so that's not a worry. But if Quinn isn't at 100%, you'd rather have some of that cover there in the form of course, Awujo, who could play a big role, but then, of course, having Grosso around just in case Fleming needs to play a bit more defensive, etc. I think it's tough for Desiree Scott. But I think for Scott, she's someone I immediately look to as an alternate, and something where alternates, they're around the groups So it's almost having a bit of a veteran leader can help because they'll bring that presence. And then also a Scott, you know that if she's called upon, she'll come in and do a job defensively. Say if Quinn's just too beat up and you need a 6 replacement. So I'd say I'd probably find a way for Scott to sneak in as an alternate and Grosso to make the her way into the squad as a fourth midfielder.
So this is hypothetical because we don't know what Bev's going to do, but let's just say she does go with the 4 center backs and 3 central midfielders. Do you think the reasoning would be because we play with 3 center backs and 2 midfielders in the starting 11? Do you think that's the more logical thing, I guess? Because I get what you're saying. Like, we could count Carl as one of the center backs and it bumps us up to 4. I think yours makes the most logic. I'm just thinking if it does end up this way, is that probably the reason?
Yeah, well, I think that would definitely be the reason, and I think that's something to consider. I think that's kind of what Ollie went with here. I would just counter that. I think you'd want more midfield depth because there's more. It's more likely with the accumulation the midfielders are get that you'll need those fresh legs of a Grosso on the bench, of a Wujo, Quinn, whoever's on the bench. Whereas again, I think with the center backs, I think it would almost make sense to have the 4th center back be an alternate where they're around the group, they're there, but it's just with spots being at a premium, you're going to need more forward depth. You're going to need more midfield depth. Heck, even wing back depth, right? Of course, with the backup. Whereas the center back, you're not going to really be changing your center backs in game unless there's a huge emergency.
No. And if you need to squeeze Carl in there, like you said, yes, she'll play on the left-hand side of the back 3, but then you could go Gilles in the middle, Buchanan. You could go Buchanan in the middle with Rose. Like you can make it work with Carl in there as well.
And then brings Zadorsky in after.
Exactly. All right, but then now the big one is the forwards. And like we said, Becky could also go as one of the wing backs, but she's under the forward right here in Ollie's roster. So we have Leon, Lacasse, Heidema, Becky, Prince, and Deanne Rose. Plus then Smith and Vienne on the bench. You said you already want to see Vienne in this roster. So who's missing out? And I'm already going off your hypothetical. Zadorsky out, Grosso in right now, right?
Yeah,
so
that's the one change.
That's
and
the one
change I think I would make is I just don't see Deanne Rose making it at this moment. I just think her form at club level, obviously she's come off an injury, tough Achilles injury. She just hasn't been able to get up to speed in the same level that she was before. And you've seen it with Canada. She's just kind of looked off the rhythm a lot of times when she's played. So I know Rose has been super good under Priestman, and Priestman's kind of given her a pretty fair chance at getting a spot. I saw her get some starts at the Gold Cup, and every time she just looked off rhythm, off form, when I think Vienne, she can bring something off the bench at the least, if not as a starter. I think that's immediately a change you make. Vienne for Rose. I think from there, I wouldn't argue with that. Of course, there's a question of, do you think Smith slots in? It's such a tough question.
It feels harsh. It feels harsh to leave Olivia Smith out. It really does.
It feels harsh, but I just think it's something where Leon's a lock. That you can go with. I think Lacasse is a lock just because she can play so many positions. She can start. She can come off the bench. I think Heidema's earned it over the last few months with how she stepped up in Priestman's system, become a key source of offense. Becky, I think, will be in there just with her versatility. I put Vienne. That kind of leaves the last person. I think it's, again, something to watch. Africans mention it, is the health of Nichelle Prince. Because I think if Prince is healthy, and I think Jordan Wilson had a good point on the broadcast, you take 70% of Prince right now. And again, this is a last hint I'll drop on the article. I'll just have to drop the article itself. Is, as I mentioned, the biggest issue Priestman has up front isn't scores. Leon can score. Lacasse can score. Heidema's been scoring. Becky has been in form for Portland. Prince, when healthy, has scored. Vienne is scoring for club. Smith has been scoring, right? Now her biggest challenge is, it's always been like, oh, who's going to score the goals? I think there's players who could score the goals. It's who fits best together. And I think the unfortunate reality is the only trio that is consistently proven in the last year that they can play together is Leon, Lacasse, Prince.
Yep.
And that's the issue been ever since Prince has been out. They haven't found a consistent trio. The closest thing they found is Leon, Lacasse, Heidema, but then Heidema's gotten injured, so we haven't really gotten to see the chemistry there. I think she just needs to find a way to get a trio to work within that. And I think Prince, the fact that Prince has proven her chemistry with this group, unless she's just genuinely like at a 60% or lower, like if she's just too injured to come, then you bring in a Smith. But I think Prince has shown that with Canada's chemistry kind of issues, you're okay having Prince, even if it's 30-40 off the bench, because you're afforded the luxury of one or two of those players. And I think of that group, or of this group we've put in, of course, we outlined the potential issues for Quinn, but that's where the extra midfielder helps. I think Prince is the one player you'd rather have in that sort of role, and Vian can come in. That's a pretty healthy forward line otherwise.
So to wrap it up, this is what Ollie went with. Alex would make 2 changes. Zadorsky out, Grosso in, Dan Rose out, and Vian in. I would do something similar, I think. I think I would agree. Zadorsky out, Grosso in. I don't mind this other idea, and I kind of think I could see this. I could just see Bev doing it. Deanne Rose out again, but I would maybe go with Smith coming in. That's just to make it a little bit different, but I could see it. I just sometimes Alex, you're Vian's, I think, one of her biggest fans, and I think she constantly gets overlooked. So it wouldn't surprise me to see her not make this roster. Olivia Smith is just obviously so raw, so young, so talented, and I feel like this could be a good opportunity for her, and I think Bev could see it that way. That's just my thoughts. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but those are all 3 of us with the ideas is a very similar looking 18, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's going to be an exciting time to see who makes it. Big opportunity for a lot of these very talented players. And that'll wrap up our women's national team section of the stream. And now, Alex and chat, it's time to move on to the preview for the game tomorrow. Canada, the Netherlands. Jessie Marsch's very first match in charge. I'm very excited about it. We're going to start off today with taking a look at a couple clips. I thought they were very fascinating. We're going to start with Fonzie's clip, and then we'll dissect it. So get your guys' questions in as well. There's a lot of little tidbits of information there that I'm excited to talk about. So here is the clip right here. It's about a minute long with Davies.
The quality of training sessions have rised drastically, and everybody's enjoying the training session. Everybody's invested in what he's trying to teach us. This next month is going to be something special. But overall, I mean, he just, tries to bring the intensity that we have, try to utilize our pace, utilize our defending and our hard work that we have. I think everyone's on board. Everyone's enjoying it. Nobody's complaining, and we're excited to see what the future holds for us. He came in, with a different idea of how we should play. You have a different coach come in, and he has different ideas. That's a challenge itself. Yeah, he just challenged me to see how many sprints I can do a game, for sure. And overall, just simplifying my game, tucking in and stuff like this. But off the pitch, he challenged me. He asked me questions, some difficult questions that, I don't really think of every day. First time we met each other, he asked me 2 times or 3 times what it means to be a Canadian. The first time I told him my answer, but then he really asked me and I had to sit down and really think about it. But yeah, I mean, like question like that, and just if I was to put you in a situation, to wear the armband, how would you carry yourself? How would you, that's not a question I really get every day. And being more vocal, especially off the pitch, told me about, doing the team speeches. I'm usually not the one that do the team speeches. I just say, let's go boys, but challenge me in that way, getting me on my comfort zone for sure.
So there's a lot in that. Let me know, guys, in the chat what you guys think. We're going to bring up some points, but right away, the things that I took away was the training session. Is it a shot at John Herdman? We'll discuss. The fact that he could be Canada's next captain. We don't know a ton about it, but being more vocal, we know Davies usually just kind of comes in, stays in the background, does his thing, and he does this talking on the pitch. But Eustaquio was just kind of named captain. Doesn't mean he's going to remain captain under a new coach. It would be a big statement, I think, after just recently announcing that Eustaquio will be the captain. I think he's an excellent choice to then switch it up and go with kind of your star player, your guy in Davies, and what that would maybe mean. I don't know. We'll get Alex's opinion in a sec. And honestly, probably the biggest thing for me is one of the things that Davies gets criticism about is the fact that he does too much. And I thought it was very fascinating to hear Jessie Marsch talking about simplifying his game. We've now heard Jessie Marsch say he wants to see Davies play higher up the pitch and to play simple. Could be a recipe for success. But Alex, let's start with the training sessions and the shot that has to be a shot at John Herdman. Do you think there's any way to listen to that and not think that it was a shot at John Herdman? What are your thoughts?
I think it was definitely a subtle, let's see, like a little pot shot, right? It was definitely a little look of I think of course, there's 2 ways to look at it. I think there's something where players are motivated. I had the chance, again, I guess I'm in teasing mode today. I had the chance to speak to Moise Bombito over the weekend. Colorado Rapids were in town to play the Whitecaps. And I asked Bombito about, his opportunity, and immediately the theme I got from him was hunger, desire. I got to go earn a spot. And of course, it makes sense. Bombito's a bubble guy. He only has 4 caps for Canada. But that hunger will extend to everyone, right? Like, of course, really the only few guys in theory who can feel safe about a spot, it's Davies, it's David. But other than that, or Stakio, of course. But like other than that, right? A lot of the squad is wide open. I think you see that in the competition, the training. So I'm not surprised on that sense. But the fact that Davies kind of added in the like drastically better, everyone's, it just does feel like it's a bit of a subtle shot. I don't think it's a big one. I don't think it's something to read into, but definitely, so a bit of fun to see the tongue in cheek. And to be fair, I think that was something that was really interesting to see from Davies in this press conference. This might have been one of the most laid back versions of Alphonso Davies we've seen in a press conference, especially compared to the March window, where you could kind of tell with his form at Bayern, the Real Madrid questions, that whole, the whole thing where the media officer mentioned no Real Madrid questions and everything like that. He looked just super relaxed today, asking him questions. He was just he gave some great insight into to some stuff, and that's where the other two answers certainly was interesting to see what he had to say.
He definitely seemed laid back, and I don't want to bring this up, but I'm going to, just because it's part of the stream. I wonder, Alex, if it had anything to do with these new rumors that he's close to a deal with Bayern. I mean, not knowing what I'm not saying it is, and this is just speculation, but not knowing what your future has in store is obviously stressful. Maybe, maybe he had good talks. Maybe he's close to a contract. Maybe he's not. I don't know, but he did seem very different. He seemed smiley and in a pretty good mood. It was just a really nice look at Davies leading into these two massive friendlies. So again, this is just speculation. Don't think anything of it. It was fun.
I'd say, and again, we can talk about this. I think this is as much Marsch. I don't think much has changed, say, right? 'Cause it's like it's the same position he was at in March. I guess the only thing is he finished the season off strongly. Maybe that's just what he needed. The fact that he's in a bit of form, scoring goals. Of course, for a guy like Davies, that's going to give him confidence.
New manager too, though.
I think
company.
That leads to the next 2 points, and I think I guess it's a nice transition. I think Marsch, and that's again, we'll talk about the second point in particular because it was something I was curious about, and he gave a good answer. I think Marsch has challenged him and set some very clear guidelines. And I think that was something that was going to be very important, because what we mentioned too is something that was kind of forgotten under John Herdman, is that John Herdman had such a unique position where when he came in, Alphonso Davies, it was barely fresh. I don't think at that point he had even gone to Bayern yet, because Herdman came in at the beginning of 2018. We kind of got Davies, still youngster, raw, 17-year-old at the Whitecaps, learning his way, just trying to find his feet as a professional. Herdman probably spent most of the years just like, Alphonso, you're a star, be the star. You can really show your personality. But then by the end of Herdman's tenure, he had a star on his hands. He had a guy who'd become a Champions League winner, multi-time Bundesliga winner, World 11 player. Then it was almost like, okay, how do I rein it in? And it's tough when you've spent so much of the time building someone up, and you kind of have to be like, look, I have to come in and maybe, slow things down or build you down. I think Marsch comes in fresh slate, and I think it's been interesting to see what Davies mentioned. He's lighted out like, look, this is what I want from you. You should do this on the field, off the field. And I think that's what Davies needed. And I think you can see with how he's responded, how confident, how smiley, how happy he's been about it. I think this is something he wanted to, and I think it set up a good start for a partnership between the pair.
I think, I agree. I like the idea, and I've always liked the idea of Davies playing high up the pitch, because he has done that in the past. He wants to do that. He's hungry to do that. I just think when he gets himself into trouble is when he overcomplicates things and he takes almost the game into his own hands, and maybe doesn't go exactly as we want, and then he gets the criticism. That's the number one criticism I see of Davies with the national team is and the term is hero ball. Doesn't mean it happens all the time. There's plenty of games where Davies plays great, but when he doesn't, that's kind of what the fans are looking at, being like, this is what he does. So I just think playing higher up the pitch the way that Jesse Marsch would want him to, the ability to stretch his legs to get in dangerous positions, and then maybe not taking the ball inward for just an example, and maybe making that pass and then just go on a run because you can use your speed, like just something a little bit more simple than what he would do instead of when he goes in the middle and then tries to become a 10, which is one of the issues I've seen when he gets caught up the pitch like that. And maybe it's just that simple. Maybe it's just having, and we said this, Alex, we said this plenty of times. We wanted a manager to come in who can tame Davies. Like I know that we said, I know that you and I have said that when we looked at what manager could potentially come in. And like we said, we want someone who can manage egos and someone who could come in and get Davies to just take a look at his game and make it simple. And then we could probably get the best out of him. And is that Is that the indication here, do you think, with Jesse Marsch? Is that he did exactly that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that Davies, when asked, it was like, yeah, straight up, look, the sprint comment was a bit tongue in cheek, but I think it's something where it's true. You just want to start with work rate, like if Davies is needed in the press to press, if needed to make a recovery run to make the recovery run. But then the fact he said in position that got to keep it simple. I think it was kind of telling too. At least the way I interpret it was he said, I want to keep my game simple when I tuck in. That's kind of how I interpreted it. Like, sometimes when you're out wide, you can take those extra touches, but I think that's kind of what I understood is that when he's tucking in, how does he slow his game down, right? Like the goal against Real Madrid where it was 2-3 touch bang, right? Like it was nothing to step over, pull back. No, it was just cut in, bang, because he has that talent. Like that's never been a doubt. He's shown it for over a half decade now that he can take a ball and skin a defender and whip in a high quality cross. He can cut inside and whip in a dangerous shot. He can be dangerous in those sorts of actions, but sometimes with Canada, it kind of gets caught up into doing more than you need to. So I think Marsch has laid it out in the sense that, like, look, there's no questioning the talent, but these are some things that I think could really help you elevate your game within Canada. And I thought that was interesting. Then, of course, I think the off the field stuff was also quite interesting.
No, I think you explained it very well there, Alex, and I agree. And let's not get it wrong. Special players can do special things, and I don't want to see Davies not take chances. But I like the way that you kind of described it. Like play his game when he can, and then when he puts himself maybe in situations like when he tucks in and he's not overly comfortable, instead of, because I've seen him do it before when he runs into a body of 3 and tries to get out of it, that's where he can get in trouble. But if he does a 1-2 touch and a hit, or maybe he just makes a quick pass and continues to run, something along those lines, I think is what he's referring to. And I also want to make sure that, and I think you'll agree, but I think it just shows how much maybe Davies respects Jesse Marsch. I don't think it's easy to come into a locker room like this and then suggest something to a player like Davies. I think that Davies would have to absolutely respect Jesse Marsch and want to learn and want to listen for him to be able to take this advice and be happy and do it and talk about it with a smile on his face. And that shows, I just think that this is already blossoming into a nice little relationship very early, which I think is a good sign.
Yeah, and I thought something that was kind of, it wasn't shown in this clip, but something in the press conference, Marsch actually referred that he's had the chance to meet Davies before, because this was a good point. Of course, when Marsch was there with Leipzig, they played Bayern. He said that, after one of the Bayern-Leipzig games, he had a good, quick conversation with Davies. There's been a respect that's been there before. Also, the Red Bulls, when he was with the Red Bulls New York in 2015 to 2018, that coincided with Davies' rise. I think Marsch's Red Bulls played Davies' Whitecaps. I want to say, I think I was at that game. It was 2018 in the Champions League. They played each other across 2 legs, so they would have got a good viewing of each other. I know the two definitely would have, because Tyler Adams and Davies were kind of rising at the same time, and there was always a bit of talking and respect there. So that's also something that he mentioned. He's like, look, I've already had these, or not these conversations specifically, but he said there was already a layer of respect that existed between the two from the past. And I think that's also something too, where Davies is coming. It's a familiar face. They've had that chance to hash out that early rapport.
I like it, and I like the look of, and the body language right now of both Davies and Jesse Marsch. We'll get to Jesse's clip in a sec. We have one more point to talk about with Davies. It's a big one. It's being a captain. I don't know what to take from it. I really don't. Like I said, Eustachio was just named Canada captain. Was this referencing the fact that if Eustachio is not on the pitch, which if Eustachio is fit, he's always on the pitch, that Davies will get the armband? Is Jesse Marsch thinking of putting his stamp on this team in this way by making a change? It wouldn't shock me either way. I mean, a new manager comes in. I think he has a right to switch things up. If he sees that Davies is the captain long term, he may make that change. He may not. He may just want Davies to become more of a leader in general, just to improve and grow his game. So, Alex, what did you make of it? It's hard. Did you think more than anything, Jesse Marsch was just saying, listen, Davies, I know you're maybe not the captain with the armband, but you're a leader on this team, and I want you to be more vocal, and I want you to be more involved in the team speeches or whatever it may be to fire up the boys. Like, I want you just to take a step in that direction, and maybe down the line you can be a captain. Or do you think he really meant that he could be the captain for the Netherlands match? What do you think?
I think if I'm going to read into the first point, I think you have to remember the captaincy technically isn't set because it was just Eustachio's for that game, as Mauro Biello mentioned at the time. Just he said he was shaking things up, but he wasn't going to name anyone long term. So I think it is important to remember that it is actually still up in the air. I still think, like, I think it's something where there's just so many factors. So I'd struggle to pick someone. I think I'm a fan of keeping Eustachio as the captain,
Yeah.
is what I would say. I think he's a very good candidate. I think it would make sense. What's also nice though with Eustachio, he's a selfless guy. I don't think he seems to be the last guy that would kick up much of a snuff if it's Marsch comes in and names Davies the captain. So I think that's important to remember. But to answer the main question about the comments, and that's kind of something, again, it's why I asked the question to Davies of kind of like, how has Marsch challenged you on the pitch, but also how has he challenged you off the pitch? So I think for Marsch at the very minimum, and I think it was clear in March when Davies came out and said, look, I've put my name forward to be a captain. Davies is at a point where he has a key leadership role to play on this team now. Earlier on, he was the young face. He still is one of the youngest faces. Again, I think it's wild that we have to remember that he's like the 6th youngest player on the team, even though he's like the top 5 or top 10 in caps on the team right now. Like, he's so experienced, but he's still so young. Those first 4 or 5 years, he was still figuring it out, right? Like, that's what I mentioned. Like, Herdman was probably asking about that. Davies himself, like, he was building himself up to be what he can be, and a lot of it was just focusing on his game and whatnot. But now he's at a point where, yeah, he's about to turn 24 this year. It's a point where you can step up and really be a leader, especially given that he's been in this program for over 8 years now. And I think that's something where, the way I read it at least, was that Marsch came in and said, look, I see you as a leader in this team. I think what Davies referenced with Marsch asking him what he'd look like if he's a captain is just figuring out his leadership style, right? I thought that's a great question, right? Like, a good way to kind of pick his brain. Like, what would you do if you're wearing the armband? What are some of the things you do? I love the other question too. What does it mean to be a Canadian? The fact that it's like, no. What does it mean? Like, oh, I'm Canadian. I grew up in Alberta. We were nice. No, it's like, what does it mean to you to be Canadian? Those sorts of stuff. That's like, gets you thinking. That kind of gets you the leadership. And I think the fact that Davies ended off by saying, look, Marsch also challenged me to be more vocal, to lead speeches, to not just be a guy that's like, let's go boys, but no, like, let's do this thing and let's go together. I think he's setting up Davies at the very least to be in the leadership group. I didn't see anything that he said that suggested he's going to be the captain right up. And I think that's a good mix. Have something where maybe it's a leadership group of like an Eustachio, Davies, and pick a 3rd or 4th name as kind of your co-captains, or maybe we kind of. So I think that's also something I wouldn't be surprised to see. Marsch has always struck me as a very collective guy, and that's something that a lot of people have told me that's really impressed him. Like, he wants the buy-in of a group. He gets that sort of respect. I wonder if there's also a situation where maybe it's Eustachio tomorrow, but maybe Davies gets a chance against the France if he steps up and gets into that, and if Marsch kind of pushes him in that way. Because I think it's something where feels like Marsch will want to keep pushing him, and maybe it's give him a little taste of the armband. Be like, look, you're a leader on this team, but still not actually put the responsibilities of being a captain fully on his shoulders either.
You made a lot of good points, Alex, and I agree. I do, however, if you're asking me, this is pure speculation because we don't know, but we will find out soon. It'll be very telling what will happen with the Netherlands match and the France match to see who does captain the side. But just from listening and watching it back, I feel, my personal opinion, that he is maybe leaning towards Davies. That is just what I think.
Yeah.
I think you're right, but doesn't mean it, and it doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. I think that Jesse Marsch, it seems like he is challenging Davies every way you just explained, Alex, on and off the pitch. I think he's listening to the answers that Davies is providing, and maybe he will make a decision with, this kid is ready for it now. He wants it now. He's ready to step up. Maybe these friendlies are just, he'll pass the armband around and he'll look for Copa America, a major tournament. Who will captain that? Maybe that's where he has in mind. But I feel like Davies right now is probably up there with Eustachio, those two. Because I remember having this conversation before about Biello, and I think again back then, which is only a few months ago, we'd had a major talk about Davies, Eustachio, and I think Alistair Johnston, but really it was Eustachio, Davies, and I think we both kind of landed that Eustachio was the right man for the job. Doesn't mean that Davies wasn't, and doesn't mean that Jesse Marsch isn't going to push Davies to become the captain. I thought it was very curious, and I'm really excited to see what will happen this weekend. And if you remember, the Canada has always had a nice leadership core. Hutch, Horian, Victoria, Hoylett, those were kind of the guys. They're all gone now. It's time for another core, like you said, Alex. Davies, Eustachio right up there. I would still count Johnston, maybe David. We've seen him wear the armband for Lille. Like he could
Maxime Crepeau is someone that you can also throw into the mix.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating debate, and I think it's an important one. And I'm curious to see what Jesse Marsch does. I think Marsch wants to push Davies into it, but maybe I'm just reading too much into it. It's a great conversation regardless. So let's now listen to Jesse Marsch. And guys, while we listen to this clip, feel free to let us know in the comment section, who do you think should be Canada's next captain? If you were with us during this conversation a couple months ago, you would know we had a very long one. It was probably almost an hour. I feel like the entire stream we did once was about who should be the captain. So we won't, dive completely into it, but let me know who you think. Should it be Davies? Should it be Eustachio? Is there another shout? But right now we got a nice little clip to listen to from Jesse Marsch. So here we go.
People talk a lot about this, about being a club coach versus a national team coach. And there's obvious challenges to being a national team coach just because we don't have all the time that we would wish to have together, at least from my perspective. However, I think the eagerness and the excitement to do what we can as a national team to show our country and to represent our country means that everyone's on high attention span and high alert to try to do everything to come together, to adapt, to learn, to grow. And so, I've been careful about how much information I've given them, but at the same time, I think they've responded in a really good way and are eager to try to put it to practice. Relationships and leadership and togetherness and all of those things have already been so well established here, which is good because we're going to be tested at a high level in the next 3 matches.
I'm just writing. Leadership has been established. Did you catch that, Alex?
Yeah.
At the very end?
Again, I think that speaks to your point that I think the leadership core, and I think that's something that Biello set in March. I think the leadership core has kind of been established, right? Like the fact that it is Eustachio was the captain, but you have to imagine Davies is in that group. David as well. You can't forget worn the armband a bunch for Lille and a longtime member of this team. A Johnston, Crepeau, again, it's something you can't forget in that mix. Of course, some other guys, I'm sure, like, the likes of Larea, Osorio, all those guys in that mix. I think, the leadership is relatively well established. There just isn't a clear captain, but I think you kind of know who the leaders are, who the guys kind of step up. It is pretty straightforward across the team.
Would love to see Johnston as a long-term captain. It could be an option, and at least in the core, I feel like when it was the old leadership group, we've seen so many of them. I mean, maybe due to injuries, but I remember I can clearly picture all 4 of them wearing the armband multiple times when depending on who's fit in that old leadership core. Just with this new one, I mean, it seems like, the best players that play almost every minute. So it'd be hard to see Johnston wear it with Davies and Eustachio on the pitch all the time above them. But anyways, the other point I wanted to catch there, Alex, is I don't know if you heard it. I'm assuming you did, or the chat, if you guys heard it. He said "our" a lot when referring to representing our country. So Jesse Marsch did have connections to Canada. We've talked about that when he got appointed due to his time with the Impact back in the day. He wanted this job back in 2012, and it already seems like he's dove head first. And I don't know. What do you make? Am I reading too much into it, Alex? The fact that he's referred it to our country and he's kind of just throwing himself in there with that, that low-key Canadian citizenship.
Yeah, I love that he's diving head first into the job, right? I think that's what you want to see from him. There's all this discussion. I personally, I wasn't wholly on board. Some people, depends on your perspective. Oh, can an American coach Canadian team? Of course, you and I didn't care. I think, again, you get whoever you felt is the best person for the job. We liked the fit of Jesse Marsch. For me, it never bothered me that it was American, but it's something where that was a talking point. I think the fact to see him jump into this so clearly, a lot of what he said in his, I guess now 3 press conferences he's had as head coach, the intro one, the squad one, and now his first match day -1. He seems just really committed, really bought into everything that he's doing. And the fact that he's already saying, this is our country, our team. That's what you want to see from the top, right? You just want to see someone that's committed and bought in. So I don't think it's too much to read into. I don't think it's something where if he's saying something if he's not saying we, I don't think you're sitting there it's a big word, he's not bought in. But I do think you like that. And I think that kind of speaks to the kind of leadership he brings to the table or one. He seems to be a guy that just wants to go in the fight and take guys with him. And for the most part, I think a lot of players look willing to go into the fight with him, and it helps when he's sitting there going like, yeah, we're gonna do this, let's do this, right? I think if you're a player looking and you're like, okay, who's this guy who's been brought in externally, interesting resume, American, how's he gonna be? The fact he's coming, he's like, yeah, like let's go. I think maybe that you can only be encouraged by it, right? It can only be a positive.
Absolutely. And then the final takeaway from that little minute clip was, kind of comparing being a national team coach to club coach, and just kind of mentioning that his players have been very eager to learn. Like this isn't a ton of time to get with this team leading into 2 heavyweight friendlies, and then obviously the Copa America just on the horizon. So, and eagerness to learn from a new manager is very important. I mean, just listening to your star player Davies speak, I think it seems like it's a lot of really good vibes right now around the camp. The guys are eager to learn. How quick can Jesse's system be implemented into this team? Like, is it naive to think that the guys will take a ton into this Netherlands match, Alex? Because it is a drastically different style than to what they're used to. Or do you think Jesse will kind of like, I don't know, use pieces of what his philosophy is into this team, and then try not to change too much? They're friendlies, so it doesn't really matter if they get spanked. You want to see them be able to learn from it and grow into what Jesse wants to do. But it's something I'm really curious to keep an eye on for especially for this Netherlands match.
Yes and no. I think the big aspects of his system that will take time to fully embed is the defensive side. I think the offensive side is relatively straightforward. It's very direct. It's very vertical. It's, wanting to use the speed. I think those are things Canada can do very well. I don't think that'll be like a huge adjustment period of like, oh, you want Davies and Buchanan to get running down the flanks. That isn't anything we haven't seen before in a Canadian shirt, right? Or anything like that. The big thing is on the defensive side, but for what it's worth, I had the opportunity recently to, rewatch some old Jesse Marsch-ball at Leeds and see kind of what it looks like. There's a lot of similarities between what Canada was doing before, because Canada's always under Herman, like pretty much 90% of the time defended in a 4-4-2, just very compact, very organized. Jesse's Marsch 4-2-2 off the ball acts very similar to a 4-4-2. The only, really key differences were just kind of how strong side defenders operate. Like when the ball's on the strong side, the winger's a bit aggressive, so they almost end up pushing up. The fullback's a bit more aggressive. The striker's a bit more aggressive. The strong-sided midfielder's a bit more aggressive. But those are, little details, and those are things we'll figure out. But the fact that they're coming from a base where they already know the 4-4-2 and how it operates out of possession will help. Also, I think this is where guys, like Kyle Hebert is someone we referred a lot in our last stream, just based on the fact that he's very familiar to a sort of similar style. Maybe that gives him an edge in a potential start. Someone else, of course, Moise Bombito. Something very interesting. Chris Armas, Bombito's coach at Colorado, was an assistant under Marsch in New York and at Leeds. So Bombito plays a similar system. I think those two, for example, those are guys where Marsch might be leaning a bit to like, all right, you kind of already know the system. Maybe, you kind of bring a bit of that running hit the ground running with that. Stefano Eustáquio, for what it's worth, Porto under Conceição, spent a lot of the last few years in a 4-4-2. So Eustáquio is kind of familiar with that sort of system off the ball. I think a lot of that, and I think it is interesting what he said of like, yeah, like you want to implement your philosophies, but he's also keeping it simple, digestible. And I think the fact that some guys are already familiar, it helps, right? That like you can kind of be like, all right, those who know the formation can kind of lead the way, and then the rest, all right, we'll keep things slow and build up towards the final form of what Canada's press, Canada's everything will look like.
I think it's funny because we talk about starting 11s and what they could look like. That's just part of the fun when a new manager comes in. And I've referred to the back line with Bombito and Hebert kind of leading the way, like you said, simply off of a podcast he had, but it made sense. He talked about his philosophy, the way he wants to play, and 2 players that are playing in that type of system. What makes more sense than having players that already understand and play at the day-to-day in this way than to try to probably put them together? Doesn't mean that's going to happen, because I remember I just put out when they made our starting 11s, Alex, the other day, I put it on Twitter today just to see what people thought. And there was a lot of question marks around Kyle Hebert. I had him out at left back, having the ability to kind of create a back 3 with him. But I mean, everyone's like, why Hebert? Why Hebert? He's barely got any caps. He's been playing center back mostly for St. Louis. He's not really a left back. Then people were commenting and being like, he would probably drop into the back three. You don't have a fully fit Richie Laray. You don't have Adekubi there. Davies is already playing further up the pitch. Like we're gonna do it because we always do. We're gonna build our little starting 11 here, Alex, because that's what we do. But like I think it makes sense. Like I don't think I'm missing anything when it comes to trying to fill that back four with a player at left back right now. Who else would you go with? Maybe I saw Kamal Miller. Maybe do you think that could be a look at left back? Obviously, he's done it years ago for Canada. I'm just trying to figure out, at least in this window right now, who could go at that left back spot. And I don't think Richie can start, and I don't think Davies will play there.
Yeah, I think it's just the lines seem clear that Davies is gonna, play higher up the pitch. I think the fact he's talking about simplifying his game, I don't think he's referring to playing at left back when he's saying that. So yeah, left back, I see it feels like it's Kyle Hebert or Kamal Miller at the very least, because Richie Laryea, he can play there. He's not even fit enough really to start there, so that just feels like he's not in that mix at the moment. So then it does come down to a Hebert or a Miller, and I think it's not illogical to suggest that someone like a Hebert, fresh slate, new manager, familiar with the system, it might be a bit weird to not see a Kamal Miller start, or maybe it just ends up being Bombito, Miller, Hebert, which we can also see as a possibility. But that it just feels like that gives Hebert a big edge in this moment, and I think it's something where watching back Marsch's system, I think something that really stood out to me is that it seems very tailor-made for Sam Adekugbe's skills, and it makes it a bit frustrating for him, at least, that he's not here, because he'd have a big role to play, and I think he'd be the de facto starter just because he seems to fit what Marsch was asking of his fullbacks. But the next closest thing appears to be the one of Hebert and Miller, and I think the fact that Hebert has some familiarity just seems to give him a bit of an edge.
So let's do it, because we do it all the time. It's the part of the fun, Alex. So you're from what you just said, then we're gonna go 4-2-2. You don't like 4-2-3-1?
Yeah, we can. Basically, the way I saw it is 4-2-2, but it just depends on the number 10. Like the number 10 in what I watched was Aronson. He would sometimes play as a 10 on the ball, but then off the ball he would just be a striker. Really, the one thing is there's going to be a back four, there's going to be a double pivot, there's going to be two wide players, there's going to be at least one striker. It's a question of, is it someone playing as a 10 whose kind of job is to become a striker out of possession, or is it like a true second striker? That's kind of really the only argument or question mark we have heading into Marsch's first 11 tomorrow.
Well, we will go line for line just to make it, a little bit more fun. We won't spend too much time on the obvious. I did get asked this question quite a bit. Like, I don't want to spend too much time if you don't think so. Is it Crépeau for sure? Do you think Dane St. Clair starts against the Netherlands, or is it Crépeau?
I think it is Crépeau.
Okay.
I think it's just an opportunity for him to step up from the start. A bit of a fun fact. Well, fun fact. It's something to note that Crépeau, his possession stats might give him a bit of an edge. Something that stood out is that in the past, at least in the game I watched, again, Ilan Millier, not the greatest goalkeeper with his feet. Crépeau's possession stats are in between him and St. Clair. That's the one edge that Crépeau really has, is like he completes something ridiculous, like 60% of his long passes, 98% of his medium passes, and 100% of his short passes. I think, that's something to note, that Crépeau's ability on his feet might really help, especially if Canada's forced to go long a lot. The fact that Crépeau has a good history of finding his forwards with those long passes is something to keep an eye on.
All right. I mean, I'm already on. I just didn't know if there'd be a shock, and it's all of a sudden it's Dane, but no, I agree. And we've talked about this a lot. It's Crépeau. Back four, I think we, despite Bombito only having 4 caps, I do truly believe he will be a big player around this back four for Jesse Marsch. I think Johnston and I still think Cornelius are locks. We're just kind of looking at that left back. Is this a way to get Kamal Miller in this roster? Is it Kyle Hebert for the reasons we talked about a bunch? Am I missing something? Is it Cornelius who will be dropped? Miller slides in and then you get Hebert in there. Does Hebert play at center back? Because that is actually what he's been playing. Although, like I said, if you shift, and it all depends on the opponent as well. This isn't going to be the same starting 11 against every single team. And if it is, they might play in different ways depending on what France or the Netherlands bring. You could ask different things of each one of these players, when to press, how to press, what they may do. But just in general, we're talking general talk right now, Alex. Left back for this match. Who are you going with? And are you dropping Cornelius or Miller, or how do you want to do it?
That's tough because I wonder if Marsch might just go because it's his first game, not rock anything too wild, right? And I wonder if he just goes kind of Cornelius and Miller.
Cornelius and Miller.
And then against France, maybe think of bringing in a Hebert. I know it's bold, but in theory, I think if you're more worried about one team tearing you apart offensively, I don't think it's unfair to suggest you'd be a bit more worried about France. So I think maybe in a game like that, Hebert's familiarity with the system, you almost think, okay, maybe you give him a go against France. And I think first game in charge, you could kind of just throw out both Miller and Cornelius alongside of Bombito and be like, all right, first game, prove me. So I'll go Miller. But again, like we mentioned, the Hebert thing is very worth keeping an eye on and makes this discussion difficult.
We've built a lot of different 11s, like hypothetical 11s for Jesse Marsch, and this is the first one. And like a day before the game, this is the first time we've had Kamal Miller at left back. So we don't know. We're just having some fun with it.
Well, I think this is just if you're thinking Netherlands game specifically.
Yeah.
The fact that it's like his first game in charge, I just find it just hard to think that like a Kamal Miller might be dropped. And I think in a scenario where it's something like this, could make sense, and then you kind of build from there. Maybe Hebert comes off the bench, and if he shows well, then he earns a start against France or something like that. I just would be very surprised if you see two brand new faces as in Bombito or Hebert, but don't be surprised either is what I'd say as well. Like it feels like it's very open.
Well, if you're asking me, I think Bombito is the if I was gonna really place a bet on it, it's Bombito over Hebert in the surprise. Like I just feel it's Bombito time. So yeah, we'll go with that. I like it. Kyle Hebert, like I kind of said, mainly features as a center back, and he also only has one cap for Canada. To Alex's point, is why Kamal Miller, and Kamal Miller has speed as well. So anyways, moving on to the midfield too, Eustachio, Kone, and I don't think there's even a point of discussing it. Eustachio will be the 6, Kone will be the 8. Those are your two midfielders. This system will probably hurt someone like Chouanier, who, if he was looking to get a chance, I think it also could hurt Osorio. And I've seen that quite a bit, Alex, when, you look back on some Jesse Marsch's teams and they're creating, the 4-2-3-1s when they play with a 10, some people are looking at Osorio to be that guy. So what do you like? If for the 4-2-3-1, the chance that Osorio would get in this roster would be as the 10. But if we're doing the 4-2-2, there's not really a spot for Osorio, because then why do you have Davies Buchanan, right?
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I think we'll get to it when we get to the front too, because I think that's where the Osorio and Chouanier discussion become more prevalent. I think one note on the midfielders, just to note something that I noticed, Eustachio seems tailor-made for the Marsch system. I think Tyler he'll fit a lot of what Marsch has asked of Tyler Adams in the past. In terms of just being an aggressive ball winner, Eustachio can do that, but also, of course, in possession. Kone, it's a little less clear of how he fits in the pivot. So I think he'll still start in the pivot in this game, but that's something to watch, where there is a chance that if Kone seems a better fit higher up the field or something like that, a Samuel Piet could slot in as a number 6 for two more natural 6, because that's one thing that stood out with the 4-2-2-2. Watching it is that the 2 in the midfield are very conservative, and Eustachio can play that role. Of course, we know he can go forward and score goals, but he doesn't need to. Whereas with Kone, it feels like that's a big part of his game, and I wonder if the fact that he might be asked to play a sort of more stay-at-home role, to use that sort of term, if that might suit a Samuel Piet, for example, versus an Eustachio, and then that frees Kone to go elsewhere up the pitch. I think Kone starts there. I think Marsch will probably ask him, all right, look, play that sort of role where, it's a bit more defensive than they used to, but in transition, you're going to need to be very key, right? Like breaking the ball forward, feeding the likes of Buchanan and Davies in transition. But that is something just to watch long term, how Kone kind of fits in that pivot, what is asked of it.
No, it's a good point, because there's not another option really except for Piet. If you're looking for another 6 in this squad right now, right? Like it's Eustachio, it's Piet. I don't even know if I have Kone in there as kind of like that double pivot. He will definitely be asked to do, defensive work. But if I'm looking at a 6 and a 10 for those two options, I'd say he's more of a 10, although he's an 8. You know what I mean? Like he's got more.
He's more of an offensive.
Yeah, more ability.
He was a winger coming through the academy. Yeah. His biggest impact for Montreal and now Watford has been his possession, his passing, his, even this year, you saw, I think, what was it, 4 goals, 3 assists. It's offense. We saw that with Montreal. Defensively, he's grown a lot and he's continuing to grow. And it's something where maybe this will be what he needs to find the balance between being a defensive stopper while still contributing offensively. But I think especially in games like this, where against the Netherlands, you might not have much of a chance to drift too far forward because of the level of team you're playing and how they'll want to possess the ball. I wonder if you might see something where it's kind of you throw in a Piet just to really go for 2 familiar faces. But I think this could also, I think that's maybe an area where we talked about Marsch challenging Davies to keep it simple. Marsch maybe challenging his back line. I think a challenge he'll ask of Kone is the defensive side really stepping up on that side to fit in that pivot.
He would have to be with a 2-man midfield of Eustachio Kone against a side like the Netherlands or even France, if that's the way they go. It might be a recipe for a lot of defensive effort, and maybe Kone having to change his game a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if it is Piet in that double pivot, then you would probably lose one of those 2 strikers up top, which I just threw Laren in for the time being. But it could be Kone up as the 10. Could also be Azorio, like I talked about. I don't think a lot of Canadians would love to see a roster coming out with Kone on the bench and Piet in the team, but depending on what the opposition is and what Jesse needs to ask of his players, it might just make more sense for his system. So yeah, Alex, I agree. Something to keep an eye on, but we'll keep Kone in there for now. I don't know if you want to spend too much time on the 2 wide players here, Buchanan and Davies.
That's the one position. That's like pretty confident. I think there was the chance you had Davies at left back with Miller on the wing or Schaffelberg. I just think the last day is kind of cleared up that it appears Davies is going to play higher up. You have to imagine Buchanan's a written-in starter as well. Marsch will probably see him as a key part of his team going forward. I guess the only question is, is there a chance they swap? I think there's a chance you see that in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting, when I watched the Leeds game, Jack Harrison, he's a bit more of a natural lefty, I want to say, right? Or he's kind of 2-footed. And Somerville was playing, he's more of a righty. They swapped a few times during the game. Davies and Buchanan are a similar boat where Davies is the lefty, Buchanan's the righty. You could see some scenarios where they also do switch it up during the game to give a bit of a different look in it.
Yeah, in the TNT match, they swap sides. Like
they're both comfortable because Buchanan played right at New England. He's played left at Inter. Davies, of course, played left, right, center, you name it.
Yeah, I think there's no question we could see them at some point. Probably more than like a start like this, switch a little bit throughout the game, maybe end like it. I don't know, but yeah, those are the 2. The biggest question mark is up front. Jonathan David, as again, just like Davies and Buchanan, is a lock. It's that question mark about who goes there, and I kind of talked about it earlier. If Piet finds his way into the squad, it would more than likely eliminate Laren, and then you would see Kone as a 10, or somehow maybe Kone gets dropped and you get an Azorio in the 10. Maybe throw in a Hoylett question mark as a 10, maybe not. Who do you like right now for the dual striker? I know Jonathan David has to be in there. Kyle Laren, Ike Ugbo.
I was like, who do I like or who do I expect?
I want both. I want to start with expect though. I want you to, who do you expect to start up top?
Yeah, because I think based on what we've been building here, we've been mostly going on what we expect, and I think if I'm going to go on that theme, I could see David and Laren, and I say that because again, I'll continue to refer to that Leeds game because I thought it was very interesting. Just it's only 90 minutes, but you can learn a lot from just watching 90 minutes. There is room for a striker to not be fully like 100% in on the press, and it was been interesting to watch that game. For those unfamiliar, you can actually go read about it on one side because I wrote about what I saw. I'm not just talking about it here. I watched the Leeds versus Liverpool game in 2022. My logic was Leeds to Liverpool in that game is about equivalent on market value as Canada playing, France, Netherlands, Argentina. So I'm like, hey, that's a scenario where Marsch might use similar tactics, right? Like going up against a Salah for Liverpool, that's not too unlike going up against a Depay or an Mbappe over the next window. Something that really stood out is that, like I mentioned, it was Aronson under a striker. Aronson used the presser. He was so much energy, absolute, energizer bunny. But then the striker was Rodrigo. He didn't really move around a whole lot. And I think that's something where you kind of see with Kyle Laren, he's at his best when he's just kind of holding down a position, playing a hold up. Okay, I think there's a parallel where Laren could play in a similar role. Funnily enough, I don't think Marsh was too pleased with Rodrigo because he scored in that game and he still got yanked in the 53rd minute, which I thought was hilarious because in the first half I was watching, I'm like, man, Rodrigo's not moving around too much. I wonder if that's like something Marsh said is okay or if that's just his style. Then Marsh took him off. So I'm like, okay, maybe it was something that Marsh wasn't too happy with. But it shows that there is room for a striker. But I think if Laren starts, then you're going to absolutely see David in a very like in that Aronson role where it's very aggressive, very high pressing, making up for it. So that's something where I expect, right? I think if you're Marsh, you give Laren a shot. He's the all-time leading scorer of the country. In a game like this, you want someone like that on the field, but it might be something where it's like, all right, Laren, here's your defensive boundaries. David's going to maybe cover you in some areas where you're not as strong, say as like, those defensive sprints and make up for it. Boom. In terms of what I'd like to see, I think based on the fit, if you're talking two pressing forwards, it has to be David and Ugbo. I think Ugbo showed at Sheffield. They played kind of a system where they asked their strikers to press. Ugbo impressed me with his ability to push forward and work off the ball. I think that's the natural fit there. But I think for now, I don't think you're going to see Laren drop right away. I think that would be a big message. I think Marsh tries them out. And I think based on what I've seen of Marsh in the past, he's willing to. Then Patrick Bamford came on for Rodrigo in that Leeds game. Very similar profile to a Laren in terms of how or at least just in terms of how he moves around on the pitch.
Yeah.
But it shows that Marsh is willing to work with more of a target 9, even though there is the idea that he wants to press. He wants to be that sort of defensive manager.
No, I mean, I like it. I mean, we know that Jonathan David is not just a natural number 9. He can do other things. His pressing ability is one of the things I love most about him, but his ability to drop into that pocket, you can almost make it look, you could argue like a 4-2-3-1, right? Like if Davies drops into that 10 a little bit to allow space for Laren just kind of play that natural number 9, they could play alongside each other. They've done it before. There is familiarity there. And like you said, Kyle Laren is our top goal scorer of all time. So it would seem, I just don't, like I said, the number one reason we come up with rosters and starting 11s that don't have Laren in them is because he's not the exact fit. But I thought it was interesting you going back and watching Leeds and kind of coming up with, all right, well this is what, and I'm sure Jesse's done that too. He's taken on some big teams as an underdog and won. There has to be something there that he would reflect on and be like, all right, this could work. So I like it. I mean, I think this, Alex, looking at the starting 11 right here, I feel like this is a very realistic. There's not like I'm not looking at this and being like, I really think that Kone's not going to start for it would be Piet. I'm not really looking at this roster and being like, yeah, if we put Ugbo in, I probably would look at it and be like, yeah, maybe, maybe
bold, right? Or Chouanier or Hebert.
Hebert.
I think this is realistic for game 1. I think it's something where long term, Hebert, Chouanier, Ugbo, all these guys we've mentioned, keep an eye on them. They fit the system, and it feels like over time they could claw their way in. Just for game 1, first game in charge, Netherlands, I think this is a realistic way that balances how Marsh wants to play, keep some familiar face together. Marsh has mentioned in his last press conference that he sees this team having 12, 14 already like starters. I think he might also want to look at those starters and see how they fit in his system. It could make sense for them to kind of get a go now and see, because again, I think it's something where an interesting challenge for Marsh is, as much as you want to see new faces in the system, since he's coming in and he hasn't worked with some of the older faces that is there, he'd almost rather see how Laren reacts in the system now versus the first game of Copa America against Argentina, right? Like if Laren really struggles over the next few games and say Ugbo comes off the bench, looks great, Diobert comes off the bench, looks great, Tani Oluwasi plays, looks great, you name it, Chouanier plays, looks great. You're like, okay, I can give them a chance, but you may as well figure out now, okay, how can Laren fit in the system? Could there be Could Marsh finally get that famed David Laren partnership, which we only see in glimpses, we've only seen in moments? Could he finally make it work? I think it makes sense. He kind of gives them a shot and sees how they look in the system.
I agree. I agree. And it makes sense. It would have been bold, like you said. That's the word to use, Alex, for Hebert, Ugbo, Chouanier, whoever it may have been, even like a Dane St. Clair, like that. I would use the word bold. I feel like this is realistic. And it wouldn't surprise me, though, like you mentioned, even for the France match, if Ugbo, Hebert, some of these guys find their way into the starting 11, depending on how this team performs against Netherlands. Maybe they play fantastic and he's like, okay, no, something is working here, and we only see like 1 or 2 changes. Only time will tell, and guess what? We're going to find out tomorrow because the game is coming up. It's going to be a massive friendly, one of the biggest friendlies I can't even think if there's been a bigger friendly to date. And guess what? We followed up with France. So this is going to be one heck of a little June camp here just before the Copa America, which is coming up very quickly. So that'll be all the time for our stream today. Hopefully you guys are excited for these friendlies, excited for the Copa America, the Olympics that are coming up. It's a massive, massive summer for Canadian soccer fans. Alex, myself, and plenty others here at One Soccer will be doing a lot of awesome content on the website, here on YouTube. So just keep an eye out for that. Hopefully you guys are excited. The game will be on One Soccer, both the Netherlands and France match. So that is where you can find them. I've seen some questions on X and in the chat where to watch it. We have the games here on One Soccer, so be sure to subscribe. And if you guys enjoyed this this episode, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.